Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I'm bringing you guys something a little different, and I know a lot of people might complain about it, but there's a reason why I put together this build. I've been trying to think of a way to improve my overall tanking and trying to find a way that I can make a tank that's worthwhile plus has the ability to do a little bit more than just block damage and, you know, do some minor debuffs and things like that. I wanted something that would do a lot of different things all at once, but mainly focus on debuffs against the enemy. Now, this build does not have any CC, which is unfortunate because I did choose a Nightblade for this build because of the benefits the Nightblade offers and how it pertains to this particular setup. So let's get right into it. First, we are an Imperial. Imperial is the best for this. You can't get anything better. I know you guys are probably thinking, well, I could use an Argonian. It's going to give me the great sustain and all that. But, you know, honestly, the potion sustain thing isn't necessary. So let's get right into it. As you can see, 17k magic, a 37k health, 21k stamina. We do have a decent stamina recovery, which is important. It is really important. Magic recovery is, it's okay, but it's a lot better once you pop your potions. If you look now we have 1,045 magic recovery with 1,168 stamina recovery, which really plays well with this build. We also have an 1,800 weapon damage with a 31% crit. This is important. We have 22k spell resist with a 21k physical resist. Now, if I was a DK or a Templar with this build, and any class can work with this build. Any class. You just need to change a few skills up. But as you can see, decent on the spell resist and stuff like that. When I buff up though, and I'm fully buffed up, I actually go up to 28, and then when you add in our monster set, one of our monster sets, we actually go to 32. So we actually have really good resist with this build. Now moving on down here, we are using the Atronach Mundustone because we do need that magic recovery. It's really, really important we get that magic recovery. And then on top of that, we are using Tri-Stat Food. Tri-Stat Food is very, very important. Now you guys are also going to see we have Minor Slayer. This is because we are running Alkosh with this setup. Alright, so moving on now to the gear. Tri-Stat Pots and Tri-Stat Food is going to be a good, the better option with this because of what it does and how it affects you as a tank. So going to the gear, we are running Lord Warden, and with Lord Warden you get extra resistances, plus you get, when you take damage, you have a 50% chance to summon an orb for 10 seconds that increases the physical and spell resistance of you and your allies within 8 meters by 3,870. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. Really important. The other set we're running is a crafted set, and it's an unusual set for a tank to use, especially when running a sword and board, and a lot of people will complain about this, but I do want to show the advantages of it before I show you, or I explain why. So first off, the set we're using is Night Mother's Gaze. I know, unusual. You have a sword and board. You already have Major Fracture, right? Wrong. You only have Major Fracture on one target at a time. With this, we can apply Major Fracture to multiple targets at a time. So when it comes to trash fights, and you have all your DPS dropping Endless Hails and dropping their Caltrops and stuff like that, all enemies are affected by this. So you can boost the DPS of your Stam DPS's AoEs a lot with this. And it makes it really powerful in that sense. So I'm going to just go ahead and show you guys what I mean. So I have a area over here where I have 5 target dummies set up. And I am running a bow on the back bar for this purpose only because I wanted a simple setup for it. So if you use Endless Hail, and you watch, look at it, all of them have Major Fracture. That's what that broken disc is underneath their names. And all of them have that applied because of this. You can keep this up 100% because all you have to do is critical damage. Once you do critical damage, they get major fracture, and it lasts for the duration. So you can pretty much keep this up the whole time that you have Endless Hail up on your targets. So this is really good for trash clearing in dungeons. This gives you a great way to keep that major fracture applied to your enemies without using a skill. Now, you do not taunt the enemies, but you can keep major fracture applied. Alright, moving on to the rest of the gear. The other gear set we're running is Roar of Alkosh. Now, Alkosh is a really good set for this setup because it does give you that little bit of extra weapon critical. It does give you Minor Slayer, so it does boost your damage by a small margin. You're not a DPS, but it does give you that, and it gives you a little bit of weapon damage. And then it gives you, when you activate a synergy, you send out a shockwave that deals 2,390 damage up front, and then 15,290 physical damage over 10 seconds. This will also reduces the physical and spell resist of the enemy by 3,010. So, when you think about it, you have major fracture up, you have this up on a group of trash. This is really good. This is going to help you defeat that trash a lot faster. So, for dungeon clears, this will be a speedier setup, and it'll help you clear dungeons really quick because of it. Alright, but let's go on a little bit more. We're going to talk about the traits and the glyphs on our gear. So we are running 3 tri-stats on the big pieces infused. Now, the reason we're running the 3 big pieces infused is because this is going to give us more out of these stat-wise. Now, moving on to the smaller pieces, we are running small, sturdy pieces. On the shoulders, the gloves, the belt, and the boots. Those are all sturdy. And running sturdy gives us better block cost reduction, and it gives us some just overall good tanking stuff. Now, we also have on the sturdy, we have health enchants to boost our health up. Now, we are an Imperial, so we do get 12% max health. That's why we have 37k health here, with a 21k stamina, 17k magicka. And it's because of these here. Now, if you watch, when we swap bars, we do lose some magicka and stamina, but our health stays relatively pretty close, you know, to the same. So that's really good that we have that. But on the shield, we are running a sturdy with tri-stats. This is going to give us greater stats, but if we swap bars, we're not losing a big chunk of stats. We're just losing a little bit of stats. If you put like a single stat on here, like health or magicka or stamina, it's going to be a lot larger. So when you take this away, you're going to be losing a greater amount. And you don't want to lose a greater amount. Moving on, though, to the jewelry. We are running 2 just robust. It doesn't matter. You can turn this healthy if you want, but you'll have to put some stats into your stamina pool. But just 2 robust here with shield play. So we're going to reduce that block cost and our bashing cost. And then we are running a infused stam recovery. You don't have to run a stam recovery here. If you want to run a potion cooldown, you want to run something else, you can do that as well. It's up to you. I like the stam recovery because I like having a greater stam recovery pool for when I'm fighting trash in a dungeon. I'm not blocking as much because I have my own self heal that I can sustain with. So I use this to help sustain my resources when I heavy attack. Because when you heavy attack, you actually get this back along with the heavy attack. So if you watch over here, I'm going to go ahead and use some of my stamina up. Now if you watch, when I heavy attack, you'll see the bar moves a little bit beforehand and after. And that's because I'm getting the 2,000 something back. So I'm going to heavy attack, and you'll see I get like 3k back. And the reason why is because I'm getting the 2,700 and whatever stamina it is I get when I heavy attack, 2,763, plus 1,100 and something. But when you add in the effect of the potion, I'm actually getting 1,168 with my heavy attack. So I'm almost getting just over 3K. Almost, well, I'm getting over almost 4K with it back instead of 3K or 2K, 2.3K, whatever, or 2.7K. I'm actually getting almost 4K back with this heavy attack. So really important to do that when you're fighting trash, or you're, you know, especially when you're in a trial and you want to get resources back. This is a good way to help you boost getting resources back if you can heavy attack. So, alright, now moving on to the weapon, the sword and shield. The shield, like again said, sturdy, tri-stat. The sword, we are using infused crusher. This is ideal for most tanks to use on their front bar. That crusher is going to give you extra spell and physical pin. Now you got to remember, I can keep crusher or the major fracture up all the time, not just with my taunt, but with my AoE on the back bar from my bow. So with that and this, all I have to do is light attack enemies. So if I go over here and I hit these guys with the bow, if I do this and I switch and I light attack this guy, light attack this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, I can actually keep the crusher applied to multiple targets at once. It's not just one at a time. So you can reapply it to other targets, or keep it applied to other targets. So that way you can boost up the amount of damage you do. Now the nice thing is that with Alkosh, I can keep the 3,010 extra penetration on them for spell and physical. Then I have the extra spell and physical from the crusher, and then I have the Night Mother's gaze. So it's really effective for that purpose, to keep that applied to them. Now on the back bar, or on the bow, we are using a weakening enchant. This is your basically going to help with your damage reduction that you're going to be keeping on the enemies. This just helps out a lot, especially with using a bow. If you wanted to use a staff, you could do the same, but I would suggest if you use the staff, boost up your spell crit. That would require you to use the Thief of Mundustone, and you would have to use it. So, because you would need your spell crit to be higher than 19% to keep it applied. 31% is more than enough. Oops, did my fear thing. But like I said, all you have to do is crit on these guys, and a lot of times you don't crit. But when you do crit, it stays applied to them, and you can keep it applied to them really easily. So when it comes to trash and trials or dungeons, you can keep major fracture on all targets instead of just one. And this does help with bringing like your speed on bringing down trash in trials. Now, if you don't want to run a setup like this, you don't have to, but it would be wise to have one of your DPS run the Night Mother's Gaze set for this purpose, to keep major fracture applied to multiple targets. And they can run it with Reliquin, they can run it with, Reliquin in that. That's a really good combination. But a tank can do it just as well as a DPS can, and that's why this setup works out so well. Now, it's not the best setup in the game. There's a lot of different setups tanks can go with. This is just one. Alright, now moving on to skills. Now, like I said, any class can do this. I chose a Nightblade because of one of their passives in the assassination line, which is called Master Assassin, I believe. Nope. This one. This one here. No, here it is. Increases the weapon and spell critical rating for you by 438 for each assassin ability slotted. So we don't have one on our front bar, but if we swap to our back bar, we do have one assassin ability, and you can see that we get that extra crit. So on the back bar, we actually have a higher crit chance. Now, what you could do, if you wanted, instead of using, like me, I'm using Flawless Dawnbreaker on the front bar just to boost my weapon damage some, you could use this ability here, Incapacitating Strikes, and just put it here to give you that extra crit. So that way, when you're on the front bar, it's the consistency of your crit is a little bit better. It's not going to be phenomenally better, but it is better, and it allows you to keep up that crusher, or not the crusher, the weakening, and the major fracture a little better. As you can see now, all of them are have been crit, and they're all staying with major fracture applied. So it's just like I said, it's a really good way to keep that major fracture applied to your enemies. And it helps out a lot in dungeons and trial play. Because the faster you can kill something, the better off you are. And it allows for a smoother run through the dungeon or the trial. Alright, so passive wise, make sure you get all your class passives, very important for this build. Weapons, all your weapon passives, you want to definitely get those for the bow and the one-handed sword and shield. And then moving on to the armor, light armor, top 3, medium armor, top 2, and the bottom 1, and then heavy armor, all of them. Now, if you wanted to, you could play this as a medium armor build, but you won't have as much health. But it would give you greater crit, it would give you greater, so you're going to get greater crit here, and it would give you a little bit more weapon damage, but it's not necessary. Heavy armor, you want all the passives. This is a 5-1-1 heavy armor build, and just to show you guys that, we are using a medium helm, light belt, everything else is heavy. And then moving on to world skills, you don't need it, but this is good. You can also be a vampire with this if you wanted to. For the stamina recovery and the magic recovery, that'd be an extra 10% for both. And then moving on down here, Fighters Guild, don't necessarily need it, but I would make sure I got Banish the Wicked and Intimidating Presence with this build. Dawnbreaker is optional for this. The only reason why I run Dawnbreaker on the front bar is because you don't really need anything else. So having this here could be kind of, nice for you to boost your weapon damage just a little bit, to give you a little bit more for when you're playing and on your own or whatever. Persuasive Will, another good setup, skill to have for just questing. But Undaunted, you definitely want both Undaunted passives. Now, I did test this, like I said, with almost every class. I tested it with the DK. It works out really well in the DK because the DK has like Green Dragon's Blood, you have other things. You can even use the Mage's Guild with the DK. You can use Equilibrium, and you can use the Balance Morph to give you your bonus to your resistances. And you can sacrifice health and get Magicka back. That way you don't have to use the Magic Recovery Stone. You can actually use the Thief Munda Stone. So that's kind of something you can do if you wanted to on the back bar instead of, running something else or whatever. Moving on, though, Psijic Order, you can even use Meditate on the front bar, that kind of thing to get the extra resistance, or not resistances, but the shield and the 30% damage reduction when you use Meditate. You can do that. Undaunted, though, you definitely want these two passives, very important. And then Alliance, you just need Aggressive Warrant, that's it. And then nothing from support. Moving on to Imperial, make sure you get the Imperial passives. The max health is really good. The 10% max stam really helps with this build, with this particular type of setup. And then Red Diamond is amazing because your melee attacks have a 10% chance to restore 6% of your max health. So it's another heal on top of it. So anytime you use your Pierce Armor, your Heroic Slash, that's melee attacks. You can't use Endless Hail, it's not a melee attack. But anytime you light attack or heavy attack on the front bar, you also get this chance of healing yourself for 6% of your max health. And it's not much. It's like 2.7k, but it's still pretty good. And then over here in crafting, Alchemy, Medicinal Use, and then Provisioning, Gourmand, and Connoisseur. Those are very important ones. Alright, so going over the skills, this is how I have the skills set up for the build, and it works out really well. We have Pierce Armor. This is going to be our Major Breach, Major Fracture, and our Taunt. This is what we're gonna use this quite a bit. But when it comes to Trash, we're gonna use this on targets that we need to taunt. The targets that we don't really need to taunt, like certain ranged enemies and things like that, we do have another taunt for that. Then we do have Heroic Slash for the ultimate gen for minor heroism and also minor maim. But we also have the weakening enchant on the back bar, which is almost equivalent to minor maim in itself. But the minor maim with it is great with weakening because you get a lot more on it. Next up, we have Spike Bone Shield. Now, you don't have to use Spike Bone Shield if you don't want to. I just choose to use it because it's actually really good. The other Bone Shield, Bone Surge, is really good as well. Now, it does cost 3,705 stamina, so what I would suggest you do whenever you use Bone Shield, pop Bone Shield, heavy attack, because you're going to pretty much get the stamina back. So you can go right into a block right afterwards. So, Bone Shield, heavy attack, block. And that way you can keep your block sustain up there and everything. Alright. Next up, we have Dark Cloak. This is going to be our main heal. As you can see, cloak yourself in a shadow to heal for 32% of your max health over 3.5 seconds and gain minor protection, reducing your damage taken by 8%. You're going to pretty much keep this up a lot because this is also what you're going to be casting to get your Shadow Barrier. This is what gives you your Major Ward and Major Resolve over here, and it lasts 13.5 seconds, so you will be casting this every 12 seconds at least. So, next we do have Absorb Magic, and yes, it's a very important skill. It's a morph of Defensive Posture. This, while you have it equipped, and it's slotted in your thing, you get 8% more damage increase that you can block, and you can also your blocking is reduced by another 8%. In total, it costs you 468 to block with this build. It's not super expensive, and you can block a lot of attacks. So, next up, Flawless Dawnbreaker, and the only reason why I choose Flawless Dawnbreaker, I don't use it. I just have it here for that 5% weapon damage, because even on the front bar, we have 1800 weapon damage. On the back bar, we have 1593. But it's mainly for when we swap to that front bar, we just get that little bit of extra weapon damage, which is nice. It's not something you have to use. Now, when you're playing solo, you can use it. Or if you're playing in a dungeon and your dungeon group is at trash, you can use this to drop it on trash. You build ultimate really fast anyway, so. Moving on to the back bar. This is where we have one skill that's actually a floater. So, starting off, you can or can't use this ability. It's up to you. Inner Rage. It's a really great range taunt. Now, if you're not using that, I would suggest on the back bar, definitely thinking about something like Silver Bolts, because this is going to allow you to pull enemies to you. It does do a decent amount of damage, and it also reduces the movement speed of the enemies. So if you use this to pull enemies to you, they're going to have reduced movement speed, and then you can taunt them, and then heavy attack and get your resources back. It's mainly for pulling enemies, if you want to use it. I prefer using the Undaunted range taunt because it's a magic ability, and I can sustain magicka really well with this build, so I don't need to worry about this. Like, I don't use it a lot. I very rarely use it, and so getting enemies to me isn't too bad. Now, if I'm in something like Black Rose Prison, or I'm in a place where I know I need to chain enemies to me, like I said, Black Rose Prison, Dragon Star Arena, V-Mall, there's a few other places where I might pull enemies to me. I like to use Silver Leash. And I know it's a stamina ability, it's really bad, but it still works out. Next up, I have Endless Hail. I only have Endless Hail here, mainly to apply the Major Fracture. That's it. Just to apply that Major Fracture. Next ability I have on my bar is Mass Hysteria. Mass Hysteria, I know a lot of people are probably going, why are you using this? Is just going to scare everything away. I need a skill on the back bar that's going to keep me with the Shadow passive that gives me 5% max health. Now, you can use Refreshing Path, and it's cheaper than using this, but you can't keep this up all the time. You can't just spam this. Like, you can't recast it whenever it comes off cooldown, or whenever the duration's up. You don't have the magicka to sustain this. So, it's either or, you can have it. But I like Mass Hysteria because in certain encounters, especially for me when I play solo, Mass Hysteria just works out better. Alright, next up, we have Leeching Strikes. And we have this here because this gives us stamina back whenever we deal a light or heavy attack. Light attacks recover 1,640 health and 106 stamina. Heavy attacks give us double. So we get twice the amount back on our heavy attacks. So that's why I like to use this, is when I use my bone shield and I need to heavy attack right afterwards. If I'm damaged or injured, I can do this bone shield heavy attack, and then I'll get health back along with that. And if I get my 10% or my 6% off of my race, I actually get 2 heals. So it's really kind of a nice trade-off there. And then when this ends, you do get 4,270 stamina when the effect ends. So, and it's based on the length of time it's active. If it lasts for the whole 20 seconds. Now, for some reason, I have a tendency to usually recast this when it's down to about 4 seconds, 5 seconds maybe. And I still get about almost 4,000 out of it. I'll just show you guys here so you guys can see for yourselves. I'll let it run down. And I'll recast it, and you see I got 861. Well, not that much because I was down. It only recovers what stamina you're missing. So if I keep my stamina burned off, there, 3,280. 3K stamina is really nice to get back. So, but it is that's a really good ability to have anyways for resource management. Next up, we have Mirage. Now, Mirage, you can use the other morph because you really don't need the minor ward, minor resolve, but the major evasion's really nice. The 25% damage reduction from area attacks. So, like anything that's an AoE, this reduces that damage. So, if you see an enemy put an AoE on the ground, this is going to reduce that damage by 25%. So, it makes you a little bit more tankier and gives you greater survivability. So, next up, Aggressive Warhorn. Again, every tank uses this, so it's just natural to have this here. As you can see, it gives you max health, max stam by 10% for 30 seconds. It also increases you and your allies' critical damage by 15% for 9.5 seconds. So it does apply to you as well because you do not a great amount of damage, but when you have Warhorn up, your damage does improve. You go up to about 4 or 5k per second, even just with Endless Hail. So, well, Endless Hail I think is like 2k, but if you're doing your taunt and your heroic slash and all that, you can get to about 4k. So, and you can keep it there consistently. I mean, it's not a whole lot, like I said, but when you're overland play, like, it's great. But that is the skills, guys. Now we're going to go over CP real quick, starting with the red tree. We have 66 in Ironclad. This reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks by 22%. We have 31 into Thick Skin. This reduces damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. And remember, Thick Skin and Ironclad both stack with Hardy and Elemental Defender. Hardy reduces physical, poison, disease damage, and we have 56 points in here, giving us a 12% on that. And then Elemental Defender, we have 56, reducing Flame Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 12%. So if you are burning, that is considered flame damage. So that's going to be 12%. When you add 13 on top of it, that's 25% damage reduction. The same thing goes with bleeds, poison, and disease damage that you might take. And then over here, this is going to reduce any direct damage you take by 22%. When you add it onto here, this is actually 44%. Or 34%. So you actually reduce 34% of the incoming damage this way. Now, if you do have the 8% up from when you use your Dark Cloak, that 8% gets added to these, taking you up to 20%. So that makes this 33% damage reduction, and it makes this 42% damage reduction. So you actually get more damage reduction out of a build that's using something that gives you an 8% damage reduction in there. So, really good. Alright, moving on. We have 40 into Bastion. This is to increase the power of our Bone Shield. If you don't know, Bone Shield is normally 30% of your max health, but with this it's 34%. And if you see where it says it returns 42% of the direct damage absorbed, that's normally, I think it's 30%, but we have points into things that boost our direct damage. So it boosts the damage that that shield does back to our enemies. And I'll show you guys this here in a minute. I'm gonna show you guys this in play. But I'll get to the direct damage thing in here in a minute. We also have 19 into quick recovery, increasing our healing received by 5%, and 2 into heavy armor focus because we have 2 points left over, and the best place to put it is right here. Moving on, we have 56 into Warlord. This reduces our break free cost by 20%, 23 into bashing focus because we do bash as a tank, so reducing that cost by 14% really saves us some resources. We have 9 into sprinter. This reduces our sprint cost by 6%, which is just something extra. We have 43 into Mooncalf. This increases our stam recovery by 10%, and 43 into Tenacity, increasing our magic and stamina return of our fully charged heavy attacks by 10%, which does stack with our heavy armor passive that gives us 25% of resources back in the same manner. So this does stack with that, giving us 35%, along with the 30 base, which is 65% total. Moving on over here, we have 40 into Tumbling. This reduces our dodge roll cost by 16%. We are wearing 1 piece of medium armor, so we actually have a 20% reduced dodge roll cost. So that's really good. And then we have 56 into Shadow Ward, reducing our block cost by 20%. Moving on to the blue tree, we only have 43 into Blessed. We do not put anything in Elfborn or Elemental Expert. Yes, if you put in Elfborn because you are using a Magicka heal, it does heal for a little bit more, but this is what boosts that heal. Only Blessed does, so you could take this up to 100 points, but you're going to sacrifice something. Moving on over here, we have 39 into Physical Weapon Expert. This increases your light and heavy attack damage by 22%, and then we have 81 into Master at Arms. The reason we have 81 in here is, as you can see, it increases our direct damage by 24%. This makes our light and heavy attacks deal increased amount of damage. We also get Reposit, and as you can see, Reposit, when you block a melee attack, you have a 15% chance to deal 4,356 physical damage back to the enemy. And then we also get Butcher, which increases our light and heavy attacks by another 5% when the enemy's below 25% health. So this right here, these two here, give us a 46% increase in our damage, but because of this 5% when they're below 25% health, we actually go to a 52% increase in our physical damage with light and heavy attacks. But we also want to get this. When you dodge roll an attack, you set an enemy off balance. So if you're in a dungeon and you dodge roll, you're going to set an enemy off balance. So that's really kind of a good one to get. But it's also that this just boosts so much of your damage, the way a tank works. You mostly deal damage through light and heavy attacks because you're using a sword and shield. So boosting that damage is incredibly important. Moving on, we do have 43 into Mighty. This increases your physical poison disease damage done by 10%. This helps with your light and heavy attacks. So remember, it's 46% base. So with this extra 10, because those two attacks are direct damage, and our Puncture and our Heroic Slash are direct damage, they get boosted by a lot more. Also another 10% on our light and heavy attacks. So that's a 46 here. And then when you go over here and add this, that's 56. We actually get to 66 or 62% damage on that. Our critical strikes, we have 34 into precise strikes, and this increases our critical damage and critical heals by 14%. And this is if you're using like those kind of things. But the main reason why we have all this here is because of the Exploiter passive. Because yes, it does apply to you as well, boosting your damage done by 10%. So, but we have 34 into here. This increases your critical damage, critical heals by 14%. And we have 28 in a Thaumaturge, giving us increased damage with damage over time by 12%. And I found out something, which I should have done with this, but I'm going to show you guys something first. So if you look here at our Endless Hail, this is the only skill we have that really does any damage over time. As you can see, it does 829. But if I go into here and I take this out and I take all 28 points and put it into here, say we're going to take this up to 56, and we're going to take the rest and just dump it in here. If I do this, take this up to 20%. Endless Hell does 829. It is not affected by the skill. So it's better to build out this way with a tank, not putting anything into Thaumaturge, not just boosting Mighty, Precise Strikes, and Piercing. Now you could take this out of here as well. I think you can get 1% more out of that. Yeah. So you could take this up to 11% if you wanted to. This overall is going to help boost your damage, the way this is set up now. But this is where most of your damage comes from as a tank, is this middle tree. So all of our damage that we do is based off of our light and heavy attacks. So now if you look, these do not bad. But then when you boost them up with all that other stuff, like now when you watch me do a Heroic Slash does 330, 6k, and then 6k on that on a crit. And anytime I deal a crit, you got to remember, any crit I deal, I'm keeping that Crusher applied all the time, and not just Major Fracture. I'm actually keeping Crusher up. So I can keep Crusher up really well with that. Alright, and that's the CP, guys. Now, to show you guys how well this build really works, I need to do something, because I did some runs with this build the other day through some normal dungeons, some veteran dungeons, things like that. But then we tried it in VMAW on veteran, me and some friends. And I'm going to go ahead and just show you guys. We didn't complete it. We're just testing it. So we went through the first few boss encounters. We made it to the twins, no problem. But I just want to show you guys like how well this build can actually work in a trial scene, like when you have a bunch of enemies hitting on you. And that's all I'm going to show you. So resource management wise. I'm going to show you the resource management. I'm going to show you how well this thing can defend itself, everything like that. Now, you do have a little bit lower health than what most people run. Most people run about 40k, but it's okay because this build is going to be fine. And you still have a 21k stamina, and you do put every point into health because you need that higher health pool. And it's nice to have about a 21k stamina pool for this. So. And whenever I use my shield, I always heavy attack right afterwards. So I can go right into blocking again and taunt, Heroic Slash, that kind of thing. Bone Shield, I'll heavy attack, block, and then use my Dark Cloak to keep my defenses up. But here you guys go. You guys can see I'm out of resources. I'm going to heavy attack, Bone Shield, Dark Cloak, heavy attack again, and I can sit here and just basically get my resources back because I can use my heavy attacks as a way to do that. As long as I have Dark Cloak up, I'm good. Go ahead and do my Mass Hysteria. In this way, I can also just stand here and hold block. I can let them tear through my shield also and then go right into block, so I can save some stuff, and then Bone Shield, Dark Cloak, heavy attack, and if I have my potions off cooldown, I'm gonna pop them so I can keep up that high recovery rate. So and sometimes you might have to do a Bone Shield, Dark Cloak, you know, heavy attack again, and then that way you can block some stuff. Now, dodge rolling, like I said, really super cheap. Just dodge roll. Bone Shield, Dark Cloak, heavy attack. I'm going to go ahead and use Warhorn. And I can stand here all day. But if you look at my bone shield, whenever they hit me and I have bone shield up, like my bone shield is dealing back decent amount of damage. Not insane damage, but a decent amount. And that's why I like to use the spike bone shield, is because it does do some damage back. But I can also use my reposit as well. Like, if it procs, I get reposit on the enemy, it does damage back to him, that kind of thing. But yeah, I could kill these guys. It would just take me a while. I'm not going to. I just wanted to kind of show you guys like the effectiveness of this. So I'm going to go ahead and let the shield come off again and just use the block and Dark Cloak. And that's it. And you guys can see for yourselves. Like, I can sustain pretty well with this as long as I have this going. And I don't have to use Bone Shield. Like, I can, like, stand here forever pretty much and just block. But when I get low, Dark Cloak, Heavy Attack, Bone Shield. If I need some extra resources, I can Bone Shield and then Heavy Attack. Now, you can't do this on all boss encounters. There's a few boss encounters where you gotta use other things, but you can pretty much sustain forever with this. And the nice thing is like, look at how cheap Bash is, too. Like, I can bash for a little bit there. And here you go. There's the Endless Hail with the major fracture on him. So this is, like I said, the Endless Hail is just there for that purpose. So you can sit there and keep Endless Hail on your enemies for as long as you need. Yes, it costs resources, but you know what? It's worth it in the long run when you can sit there and keep major fracture on multiple targets. And Bone Shield's mainly, the only purpose for Bone Shield is if you're in a really pressured spot, you can throw it up, get some heavy attacks off, get your Dark Cloak off, you know, and then go right back into blocking. And you can still do this while blocking. So you can still fire Endless Hail while blocking. And yes, this is veteran. But yeah, I could just sit here and die. I'm just gonna go throw myself to my death because I have nothing better to do. Alright, so we're gonna Way Shrine. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how the build works. As you can see, it does fine. If you're an experienced tank, the build is great. If you're an inexperienced tank and aren't comfortable with this kind of build, I would suggest going with a more understanding build, something like Akabari Dragon Guard with Eben and Alkosh, or Eben and, I'm sorry, Bloodspawn, or go Eben, Alkosh, Bloodspawn, Eben, Alkosh, Lord Warden. But this build, as you can see, it works out really well. You're not there to do DPS. You have the high crit, so you can keep up Crusher and the major fracture. That's it, or to keep up the major fracture. Now you can use a Crusher enchant if you want on the bow, which is actually a little bit better because you can use weakening on the main bar. So any enemy you heroic slash, you can keep that applied on, or any enemy you taunt, you can keep the weakening applied on, and just swap to the back bar, drop Crusher again, go back. And that way you get that greater amount of, you know, pin on the enemy with the Crusher enchant on the back bar. Really, again, like I said, it's really up to the person playing the build, but Imperial is the best race for the build because you get such a high amount of stamina or max health versus any other race. Like if you're a Khajiit, you'll have about 34k. If you're an Argonian, you have 30, 35, 36. And then if you're a Imperial, of course, with the 12% max health, you get 37k with a 21k stam and a 17k magicka. So... But that's it for the Savage, guys. I hope you guys like it. If you do, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me, you can hit that subscribe button. And like I said, this build can work with any class. You just have to change out the class skills for something that's going to give you some benefit. So, but again, like I said, that's it for the build. Hope you enjoy it. Till next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.